I think one of the reasons the Marvel Cinematic Universe worked so dang well is actually very understated. And if you're not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or don't even know what that means, don't worry about it. It's going to make sense. We'll get past it here in just a minute. There's the action, there's the characters, there's the high adventure, there's the very coherent plot. All of that is great. But the heart of the thing, I think, really connected with people. They did a great job of making characters not just whose superpowers interacted well and created balance, but whose weaknesses and in their character and their personality, their insecurities and their needs would all mesh up well with another character who could address those needs or reassure those insecurities or fears. And I've told you this before, but one of my favorite scenes that does this is in Age of Ultron when Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch are hunkered down because Scarlet Witch is freaking out and there are robots outside that all sound like Robert California and they're blowing everything up. And she's never been in this kind of environment before and she doesn't really know what to do. And Hawkeye gives her this little pep talk that probably wouldn't work on you or me, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. And then she went and smashed a bunch of robots. And that's just what it looks like when you overcome your problems in an action comic book movie. But it's exactly that customization in Hawkeye's speech that makes me love it so much. That is what she needed to hear to understand what she was up against and overcome her fears. Likewise, in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus has just finished explaining a giant open world quest to his disciples that involves flogging. He has also explained that this open world quest is going to have a now, a midterm, and a very, very long term. This is your life now, guys, is basically what Jesus got done telling them in verse 23. And then he shifts gears into the Hawkeye speech, into the perfectly customized, hey, but it's okay, and you don't have to be afraid. You've got this stuff that begins with Jesus saying this to his no doubt frightened disciples. Verse 24 of Matthew 10, a student isn't above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It's enough for the student to be like his teacher, and the servant to be like his master. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? How is this reassuring? Okay, here's the way it breaks down. I think what he's saying here is that the whole commissioning is about them acting like Jesus. It's about them imitating their rabbi, their master, their teacher, their Lord, their king, in what he's doing and the impulses he is acting upon. And as they imitate that stuff, this isn't the first time they've been told as much, they are going to endure things that are difficult. Right up front in Matthew chapter, we're doing this again, I feel like we just did this, Matthew chapter 5, he tells them starting in verse 10, that if they follow him, that's going to be a tough road. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. And so the idea here in the first phase of this don't be afraid part of the missional discourse, the commissioning that we're getting here in Matthew chapter 10, is not saying, hey, you don't get uppity and start imagining that you're somehow better than me. I'm in charge around here. I'm the king. You can't be better than the teacher. No. He's reassuring them. What he's saying is, you're not going to end up in a worse place than me because you're not better than me. I'm the king and I'm the teacher. And if they did this stuff to me, they're going to do this stuff to you. And so implicitly what he's saying is, if you go where I'm going, if you go where I'm telling you to go, you're going to get doses of the same friction, the same pain that I'm going to get in even larger doses. And then the whole thing about Beelzebub that's tagged on to the end of this thought here in verse 25 is not only reassuring, but it's a recent memory reminder of the disciples. Like, hey, if these people are going to call the head of the house Beelzebub, you're going to get it too. Like, wait a minute. Well, I don't think anybody would call Jesus Beelzebub. I mean, that's like the prince of demons, except then you turn back literally one page and it says in Matthew chapter 9, while they were going out, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, it is by the prince of demons that he drives out demons. Jesus is totally referencing back to this shockingly snarky, biting comment that he just got one chapter earlier. And what did he get that over? Oh yeah, just for solving somebody's lifelong affliction and turning their life around completely. So the point here is, guys, I know it's a big, scary open world. Hyrule is big and intimidating, and there are Octoroks and Peahats and stuff, but I'm doing what's right, and there's no avoiding the friction, the pushback, eventually the execution for me. All the more so, if you're a part of this kingdom, if you represent these values that in and of themselves are a threat to the ongoing existence of the default setting world values, you're going to get this pushback and this friction as well, and it's okay. It's totally worth it. So there's phase 1 to the reassurance, which is verses 24 and 25, which we just looked at. And then there's phase 2 to the reassurance, that is verses 26 and 27. Jesus goes on. So don't be afraid of them. There's nothing concealed that won't be disclosed or hidden that won't be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What's whispered in your ear, proclaim it from the roofs. The idea here is that you don't have to be afraid because you're going to be vindicated. There's no sleight of hand here. There's no deception. There's no trickery. It's going to look like I was wrong because I'm going to get in trouble with the government and they're going to kill me. And I guess that means there's a legal rendering that what I did was wrong or I was in the wrong. But everything's going to get sorted out. Everything's going to get brought into the light. Everything that is true will be made known. Don't feel like you need to hide anything or be ashamed of anything. You are advocates of the truest, realest thing ever, that being the King and his kingdom. Just keep doing what you're doing. Vindication will be part of it. And then the third thought in this highly customized, don't be afraid on your big open world quest speech starts in verse 28. Jesus goes on. Don't be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. We'll get to the hell thing another day. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, and yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father? And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered, easier for some of us than others. So don't be afraid, you're worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before men, I'll also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before men, I will disown him before my Father in heaven. This is a scary passage. Anytime Jesus gets into the judgment framework, it's intimidating to us because he speaks not as their boring teachers of the law, but as one who actually has the authority to be the judge. He's claiming to have that authority, and it does intimidate me that anyone being that right about everything and that authoritative isn't necessarily off-putting to me, but it does something different to me than talking with normal run-of-the-mill blowhards like the rest of us are. But this is a place where if we can get past our 21st century impulse to be offended at the idea of Jesus being judge, then there's actually a really encouraging thing on the other side, and that being, again, this theme of vindication and stuff being made right. Jesus is saying, look, there are people who look right now, but they're disowning me before men, and they'll be disowned before my Father. Additionally, there are people who are going to look at you guys on your open world quest and be like, you're wrong, and it might not be very popular. But if you acknowledge me before men, I will also acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. So the idea of this third part is you don't have to be afraid because I'm the King and I'm sovereign. And the sovereign knows everything about everything and is completely master over all of the unfolding of events in all of history. The sovereign is ultimately good in every way. The sovereign ordained all of this stuff to happen. And if it's happening, even though it might feel bad or be unfun or might be hard to see where this is all going, it's actually part of what God has ordained, and therefore it is right. And if God is paying attention to trivial stuff like how much hair you got on your head, or trivial stuff like when birds die, because there are lots of those in the world, don't worry, he's paying attention to you as well. And this, of course, harkens directly back to, what is that? It's got to be chapter 6, where we get into all the stuff about don't worry, and who of you by worrying can add a single day to his life, and all of the themes in the Sermon on the Mount about the sovereignty and provision and unlimited knowledge of God. So what you have here is a part of this speech that can be interpreted in 2 ways. One is to break it out into single sentences, single phrases, and try to extrapolate this out into a series of ground rules or promises. Maybe that's kind of there, but I really think the better read on this is Jesus just gave these guys a horrifying commissioning that changes the course of their entire lives and all of history. And then he chases it with, but hey, we got this thing. You're being sent into a difficult situation, but I'm with you. It's worth it. It's all right. Kind of like the dad with the hand on the back of the bicycle as you're learning how to do it. And at some point, he's going to let the bicycle go, but you always kind of got the impression that dad could catch up with the bicycle and make sure that the fall wasn't too bad if you did eat it as you were trying to learn how to do this thing in the early going. All of that to say, I think this is a sneaky, encouraging passage that if I were to write it to a modern audience myself today, I might frame it up a little bit differently because of the way the modern brain and modern phobias work. But I think it was perfect for the moment, in the same way that if Hawkeye were to give me an encouraging speech about going out and fighting a bunch of robots with the voice from the guy from Stargate, it would sound very different than the encouraging "don't be afraid" speech he gave Scarlet Witch. That's exactly what she needed to hear in that moment, in that place. It was very well written. Likewise, this is exactly the way it needed to be framed for these guys with their issues and their concerns and their moment on the stage of history to feel equipped and encouraged to go out and do the very difficult thing that they were being told to go out and do. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.